On this note, I would like to present Alex Farsafe. He is part of our community as a leader for over 6 months, almost a year soon. And he brought us a lot of value being as an entrepreneur in Singapore. He has Russian origins, but he's built an international business in Singapore. And his company operates globally, and he has a lot of expertise in running business in Asia and in other countries. Also, he has expertise raising capital. Alex have got Mark Shmulevich to do a webinar with us for you about Singaporean market, and I'm looking forward for that. So, Alex, please take the floor and give us a few words about yourself and introduce Mark Shmulevich and the main topic. Thank you. Alex, just microphone would be better. Please.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for the introduction. Actually, I'm very pleased to bring my friend and really an awesome speaker for this webinar, and I'm sure that you guys really enjoy this, and also you'll learn a lot about how you could move your business or expand your business in Asia from this 1 hour session. But just quickly about myself, I do build a company here in Singapore. It's an AI company called Somin.ai. It helps businesses in marketing. And from my own experience, I do have quite a big questions. I'm really looking forward to ask Mark today, and I'm sure all these entrepreneurs, all of our friends joining this session will be really very curious to know about. Just quickly introduce Mark himself. So he is a Singapore-based technology business executive and investor. He is currently a senior vice president in Taiger. It's an AI solution provider that help to do work automation. And Mark is also board member of digital transformation chapter in the SGTech. SGTech is a large Singaporean organization for a technical companies that drives and advise Singapore Smart Nation initiative on further develop of the new technology. But just being an entrepreneur, I think Mark have a very strong edge on the investment side, on the VC side. So he's also head of Somin Institute, which is a research commercialization engine, and is also early stage investor. But being in Singapore is just one side of my multifaceted, multi-talent Mark persona. He's actually was born in Moscow last time. He has a Russian origin, same as I am, and he's a PR in Singapore. He has graduated from Moscow Institute of Physics. He got his bachelor, his master's, his PhD degrees from there, and as many was, he is one of these technical entrepreneurs with a very strong technological PhD level technological edge. So he has a lot of experience on driving the business from this side as well. He led business development, largest Russian space technology establishment of the US-Russia joint venture in satellite navigation. And he also helped to launch International Research Center in quantum physics in Russia, which brought research focus on strategy and state of chief development officer. So in 2012 and 2014, Mark has also served as Russia Deputy Minister of Information and Communication Technology of Russia. So he has chance to lead this industry from a government perspective as well in Russia, and he led the team of NWA of nationwide IT industry support strategy and introduced, for example, one of things that he introduced was a 50% tax benefits for small IT businesses. From 14 to 18, Mark was Group Chief Strategy Officer of the Acronis. I think all of you know this company. This company also has some Russian origin and is HQ currently in Singapore and Switzerland. Mark is also in INSEAD. He's independent director by INSEAD, certified by INSEAD Business School. And he has delivered a lot of multiple lectures in innovation strategy and technology commercialization in various organizations. And he was also recognized as global shaper by the World Economic Forum, WEF. So it's a really amazing chance for us to have a conversation with Mark today. And as Daniel previously has mentioned, we're gonna have it's very collaborative. We're gonna have a communication. You can ask your questions, and we will be happy to pass these questions to Mark, and Mark will be really happy to answer them. But despite my introduction, I think the best way to introduce Mark is let him introduce himself. So, Mark, could you just let us know a little bit about yourself, about the company you're working with, or companies that where you are involved in, and how these companies work with startups, can help startups like ours?
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel and Alex, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share what I know. I'm not sure I know everything, but I will try to squeeze the most useful things for people who are thinking about Singapore and are assessing how Singapore can benefit their businesses or business ideas. Alex, you spoke a lot about me, so I will not repeat. I spend the biggest part of my time on operational IT business, which is Taiger.ai, a B2B information extraction solution provider, and in general, a provider of AI services that make working with information lighter for large organizations. And then also SGTech that Alex spoke about. It's the leading technology federation in Singapore. It unites businesses that have what we call tech in core, that they are either tech companies or they are not tech companies, but their revenue is largely dependent on technology. So all in all, every company there has something to do with technology. And as the federation, we advise and help these companies be more successful in Singapore. I believe this part of what I do is very relevant to the topic of our webinar today.
Sounds exciting. Our microphone is off. Alex?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, Daniel, you wanted to ask on another thing, but it's okay. Yeah. So anyway, Mark, thanks for that. Thanks for the introduction. And I think the key point today for this talk is to understand how does it work in Singapore. If you are an entrepreneur, if you want to expand into this market, and if you want to work here. So how does the startup ecosystem in Singapore looks like? Can you share a little bit with us on this topic?
Yeah, sure. First, there are parts of the ecosystem that are not really specific for startups. They are generally important for any business. And probably many of you know that Singapore can really boast a very stable and infrastructure that works well. It is very efficient. So whatever you do, you will be able to spend time efficiently. And many people know that they do the same that they do in other large cities like New York, Moscow, or London. And in Singapore, since the country is small, everything is working very efficiently. Then you find out you have half an hour, 1 hour left every day, which dramatically increase the quality of life. And I think it is very relevant because no founder can be efficient if they're not happy. And this is something that can happen. Another thing that is also general but important for startups is that the country is very friendly taxation-wise. The tax burden is not heavy. It is pricey. The country is quite expensive in many ways, but taxation-wise, it is transparent, friendly. There are a lot of things that are not taxable, so you cannot be scared of finding out later that you had not accounted for something and now you need to pay more. This is usually not happening. Everything is very transparent and you can figure out everything in advance. Now, the ecosystem for startups is huge. I will speak about several things, and I will not spend a lot of time on any of them. I will just give you a lot of ideas so that you can write down, and maybe later in the last part of our call, if you have questions about some of them, you can ask. So first, Singapore has a lot of grants. The government supports startups in different ways, but one of the most popular ways is to provide financial support in different forms, grants. The most popular grants are probably the ones that are linked to research and development in one or another way. And if you're building a technology business, most likely you have an engineering team, software engineering team. And in this case, most likely they are developing a product, and there is an R&D project anyway. If you're a deep tech startup, then of course you have an R&D project. So if this is the case for you, then I advise to look on the internet for various R&D grants, and the places to look for are NRF, which are National Research Foundation. Just go take a look and see what they offer. A-STAR, which is the largest combination of research institutes in Singapore, and they also have different programs. If you find an institute in the area which is relevant to you, you can find support. And then there are country-specific programs. For instance, if you want to go to Singapore and then from Singapore work with Israel, there is a special program for that called SIIRD, for instance. If you go to Singapore and want to work with Spain or with Germany, there are other programs. So Google that and find out. Then there are other types of grants which are not related to R&D, but they just help you save some costs. And they are usually under ESG, which is Enterprise Singapore. If you're interested, go to their website and take a look. The examples of such grants are internationalization. You go to another market and then you get reimbursement of some expenses related to expansion to the new market. Or you create a POC, a proof of concept of one of the services, you can get part of it funded, which Alex knows very well because he has more experience than me in this particular grant. Finally, regarding grants, in Singapore, you need to pay rather high salaries to software engineers you hire. And there are several ways to deal with that. One of the ways is to outsource it, but the other way is to get a grant. There is a special program called RISC, R-I-S-C, managed by EDB, which is another agency in Singapore. Take a look. So all these grants is a significant part of the ecosystem. What are the other major parts of the ecosystem? There is a special agency called SG Innovate. This is the agency that helps you with various things, linking you to partners that you can work with, especially if you're a deep tech startup, investing into you. They have invested in quite a lot of startups here in Singapore, worth taking a look. Finally, there are special programs led by the government, and not only led by the government, but supported by the government, private programs, which are accelerators, which are development programs, venture building programs. The best way to find out is to go to the website called Startup SG, and then you will see a list of a few dozens of accelerators, venture building studios, venture funds that are supported by the government. This is also very interesting, and this is a part of the ecosystem in Singapore. If you are looking for investment in Singapore, then there are some funds that on top of their private investment into a company may utilize a leverage provided by the government. And in some cases, they have an arrangement with a company which works approximately like that. You raise X millions from private investors or any other outside investors, and then we match this funding one-to-one, for instance, like that. You can take a look at the funds EDBI or SEEDS. There are several funds like that. In terms of accelerators, a couple of accelerators that are very well known here are Antler and Entrepreneur First, but you will see a few dozens of them. So lots of things are happening. One more thing to mention, industry associations. I spoke a bit, speaking about myself, about SGTech. This is one of the largest ones. There is another federation, and it's also worth taking a look because it's a part of the ecosystem, called the SBF, Singapore Business Federation. And then in every industry, there is the Industrial Federation as well. So everything is online, and you will be able to find more online.
All right, so we will try to collect all the abbreviations and links and websites later on for you guys. But I'd like to hit right into the problem, and like, let's imagine the situation when startup gets into Singaporean market and their first time on this market. What are the typical and main challenges they are facing with, and what would be your advice how to overcome them?
Okay, several typical challenges. First, in order to come here, you need to have a proper work passes. You cannot just fly into Singapore. They will not let you in. You cannot work on a tourist visa. And then one of the challenge in Singapore is to arrange that for the whole team, because Singapore is a small country, and entering Singapore is a quite competitive process. There is a special visa, special work pass called Pass, and you need to look into the details. In short, it is given in one of several situations. Either you are backed by a government-supported entity in Singapore, or you have a track record in previous business that you can just show, or, and this is the third case, you need to explain you don't have a track record, you are not supported by anyone government linked in Singapore, but then you just need to explain why you are the one that Singapore wants. This is the first thing. Now imagine you passed that gate. It is very easy to set up a business, and then you will need to hire people, and talent availability at some point of time will be something you will be thinking about a lot, because again, there are not so many people, and there are some roles, hiring in which is very complicated in Singapore. The society is quite pragmatical, and it's much easier to find here, for instance, software engineers that will have a great proficiency, technical proficiency, will do what you say, but it is way more difficult to find designers or product managers, people in a bit more creative and unstructured roles. So you need to keep that in mind, because importing people will be also not very easy. You will need to obtain employment passes, work passes for each of them. The third thing is that the country is quite expensive. It's not a problem per se, but you need to think about that. You need to think about the cost of business operations, and you need to think about cost of life. Because if you're just moving with a family and you have kids, you, at least in the beginning, you will not be able to get your kids to the local school. You will get them to the international school, and the international schools in Singapore are $25, $30 and more $1,000 a year for one kid. So you just need to calculate that pretty well. Finally, in a much later stage of your development, you can face two difficulties. One is that Asia is a quite fragmented market, and Singapore is rather small market. So when you want to expand, if you initially think that Singapore is a launchpad for you to the whole Asia, you will suddenly find out that going to each Asian country is a very different project. Business cultures are different, so the amount of effort that is needed will be quite high. And finally, when you raise funding, you might find out that the valuations that you get offered in Singapore, if you're building a technology company, are significantly lower than the ones in technology hubs, where investors get used to pricing technology assets higher. So usually the valuation here will be lower than you get in the US or in the UK. I tried to list all the typical problems. Of course, on the other hand, there are a lot of great things, and most likely you will be successful here.
Oh, thanks for that. Actually, you mentioned that indeed Singapore is a small market. Many companies maybe consider it as a beachhead market for them to test ideas, or maybe to engage with their headquarters of some Asian corporates or Asian departments of the multinational companies. But can you expand a little bit more on what could be a typical track that startups in your geography in Singapore take to expand globally? So if you're a Singapore startup, or if you came into Singapore and do business there and then you want to expand globally, and what countries could that be? Would that be somewhere nearby, or would it be, I don't know, Australia further? At what stage would that usually happen? Would that be a very early stage, or it depends, or it's more common for the later stages, which is B, C, etc.? How does this typically happen? Maybe just you can just give us some examples. You tell us some examples. How would that typically work for startup in Singapore to expand into other markets around?
Great question, Alex. The short answer is it depends. A longer answer is that first, regarding geographies, US is number one. The vast majority of companies I know have expanded to the US in one way or another point of time in their development. It's consider here that if you are building a global business, especially in B2B space, it's quite difficult to avoid US and remain competitive globally, just virtually impossible. So one of the typical tracks for technology companies here is definitely creating a product here, a prototype, then having first contracts, maybe growing the revenue to several million a year, or maybe 10 plus million a year. Usually it involves raising at least one round here. And after that, moving a significant part of the effort to the US. This is quite a typical route. Regarding Europe, I have seen companies that do the same, but they go to continental Europe or UK instead of US, but this is way, way less typical. At the same time, there is another route, expanding in Asia. And I've seen quite a lot of examples when founders were comparing both ways, because it's quite difficult to go to broader Asia and US at the same time. And the majority of the companies also go to the US, but if they go to Asia, there are probably two countries that lead as the first countries to expand to. One is Indonesia. Indonesia is the country which is very close to Singapore, and it is huge, and the population is quite young, and the middle class is huge, and it is expected that the spending ability will go up, huge market. And the other country, of course, is China. For many people in Singapore who are locals or have local partners, it's a bit easier because many of them understand how to work in China. They have Chinese ethnicity, and they have people 2, 3, 4 generations away that were in China, and they feel how to work there. But the vast majority of Western founders that come to Singapore, I believe, still go to the US.
Okay. Maybe I also wanted to ask some question on how people get adopted here. So when I came to Singapore, I did experience some cultural, maybe not shock, but that was an interesting experience. I had to learn how to communicate with people here. But what would be your view on this? In other words, Singapore is called like Asia for beginners. So in your opinion, is it more like a Asian Chinese maybe culture, or it's more like a westernized culture as compared to other Asian countries? And following that, do you need to build a lot of relationships here before people start taking you seriously, talking with you, doing business with you? How long would it take to relocate, to really start kicking sales here? And maybe some tips. Do you need like locals, or you could do it yourself as a foreigner? How does this work in this market?
All right. Short answer first. I don't think there is a concept Asia in business, because Asia is very fragmented. Business-wise, Asia is a combination of different countries, and you need to think about each of them separately. So I will speak about Singapore, but other countries will be very different. Singapore, the heart of Singapore is Eastern. It's indeed a combination of East and West. And on the surface, it's definitely more Western. It's one of the most Westernized countries of the Southeast Asia. And you can definitely see it, just look at Singapore. But the vast majority of Singaporeans, as you know, have Chinese descent, are of Chinese ethnicity, and the business culture is much closer to the Eastern culture, partially Chinese culture, than to Western culture. A few examples. In the Western culture, if you work in the US or many European countries or Israel, usually make decisions very fast. And it's not uncommon for people to meet for the first time and discuss a deal and then say yes or no, because why waste time? You already have a decision, you spend an hour together and you make a decision, move forward. Here, it usually doesn't happen this way. And indeed, as you mentioned, Alex, you need to build the relationship, not necessarily keep building it for months, but first build some relationship and understanding, and only then move to discussing the business issue. Also, my experience shows that it's quite difficult to be efficient if you are pushing. In the Western culture, it is definitely possible. You try to be fast, you try to push, and in many cases you will win. But here, in the majority of cases, you will lose. And in the beginning, you will not even understand that you lose, because people will be still polite with you. Just nothing will be happening. It will not go in the way, they will not do what you want. And in order for them to do what you want, you need to build the relation first, which is quite typical to the Eastern culture.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I indeed had experienced this when I came to Singapore, even in terms of language, right? You know, Singapore, in Singapore, they speak English, and most of the places you can communicate in English. But if you take a taxi here, you completely cannot understand what they talking to you. But then after some time, you understand this local accent called Singlish, which is pretty much a Chinese and English mixed together in terms of grammar and the words, and then you start becoming part of it. Yeah, that's right. And yes, you do not want to be pushy in Asia. I have experienced that. I learned it in a hard way. Now I'm probably a little bit less Russian, a little bit more Asian in a way I communicate. But we discussed this in the human communication side, on sales side, on the relocation side. How about fundraising? Let's say if you compare two markets, if you compare the, let's say, market of US, which is a benchmark for everybody in the world in terms of evaluations, in terms of the approach, and Singapore. And even if you wouldn't talk about valuation itself, but rather how companies, how investors evaluate the companies, how they make decisions, what would be that main difference that startups need to take into account if they want to raise money here?
Okay, let us compare local funds in Singapore and international funds, something along Sand Hill Road in California. You need to understand the mentality of the local investors. When you invest, you are buying something with the intention to sell it later with profit, right? Otherwise, you don't buy. And it means that a lot depends on the fact that there are not so many well-known exits. There are not so many exits in general. And unlike US investors or investors in many other countries, investors here are very cautious, because the track record overall in Singapore of successful selling a technology asset for a much higher price, like VC higher price compared to what you bought it for, are very scarce. There are not so many cases like that. And it means that you need to persuade the investor here that either you will be an exception, which is possible. Everyone believes that that will start. There are some examples. It should spike at some point of time. Or you need to probably focus more on the areas that investors here understand better. And that will mean probably focus more on the commercial side and business side versus the technology advantage, something like that. A lot of deals are happening in Southeast Asia, and I don't have stats right in front of me right now, but I believe that the amount of capital raised here in Singapore has been steadily growing over many, many years. So it is not like VC deals are not happening in Singapore. They are happening, but they're happening in a bit a different way. The typical Western approach, US approach to VC investment, when you spot a interesting company and you are usually very happy to do very high risk, high return deals, is not happening here so often. So if you are targeting high risk, high return investor, probably you won't find this one in Singapore.
And I'd like to elaborate on this venture capital thing and raising capital. So comparing US and Singapore is the one thing, but from a startup standpoint that are entering Singaporean market, they face a dilemma when they should raise, before entering the market or after entering the market. And if they raise capitals, for example, in Singapore, how they should do this in a proper way. So for example, in the United States, if you're raising, you have to have a business there and you have to have sales in the United States. Is it the case in Singapore as well? And probably maybe you can give some other advice on how to mimic local ideal startups for local VCs.
Okay, it is not necessarily a must here in Singapore. There are two types of funds. The funds that are somehow supported by the government or under some scheme. There are several very, very interesting and great schemes in Singapore. For instance, for a long time, the government via National Research Foundation was investing in funds that were selected using a special program, and then the funds got a leverage. They could invest twice more than without that support. And there are other examples like that. If you are talking to one of the funds which is under one of the schemes, then yes, you will need to demonstrate that what you're doing is interesting to Singapore and is beneficial for Singapore economy or society. But there is the other half of the funds, or probably even more than a half, other 2/3 of the funds that are just commercial funds here. And there is no difference. They're investing in you not because you will benefit Singapore, but because you will build a huge global business.
And in terms of what to mimic, as an example, in the United States, they expect sales. Are there anything expectations from local VCs, like basic things for them to qualify it's a good startup or not to invest?
Okay, so we're talking about those VCs that are under one of the schemes and they are looking for these contributors to Singapore,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
One of the very common things I saw is involvement in the ecosystem. I do not know what happens in case of a startup which is not a tech startup at all, but for all technology startups, it's important if R&D, software development or research they do is somehow done in collaboration with some local entities, which might be local institutes or other companies locally. You shouldn't be a lone wolf in Singapore. And this is definitely what they're looking for. In general, Singapore is very focused on building a integrated society. So every company that comes here should transfer knowledge, educate people from the outside. There should be inflow and outflow of useful things.
Thank you. Before we continue to the next question, I'd like to ask the audience, we have already a few questions. So since Mark asked us to finish within an hour, I'd like you to ask your questions in Q&A section here in Zoom, or if you're on live stream, just in the chat. We will select the best ones and we'll ask Mark. Those who are on Zoom, just raise your hand here. There is a button like that, and we can let you speak and ask your question verbally. Thank you. Alex?
I received one question from the audience. That's about these hiring locals. You know, in many countries, you need to hire some local, or maybe you need to find a local co-founder to operate. And I personally know there are a couple of companies, accelerators, or like micro VCs, like Entrepreneur First, who are helping you to find co-founder. And also there is an official requirement for you. If you want to found a business in Singapore, you want to open private limited here, you need to have a local director. So how to navigate in this perspective? Do you need to get a local in your team to successfully and fast expand? Or you can do, let's say, remotely, even like during these COVID times?
It is not mandatory to get a local co-founder, definitely not mandatory. So if you are thinking whether I need to do that or not before you see a business need, then the answer is no, don't do that. Don't do that until you face something that tells you, yes, I need to do that. There is another question, how to find a co-founder in general in Singapore. Because if you're alone and you know that you're a great CTO, you need a business person, you want to do something together, where to go? You won't go to the main street and shout, I need a co-founder. For that, there are interesting programs. You mentioned Entrepreneur First, and I hear that it works pretty well, very well. I have a company in my portfolio in which two founders met at Entrepreneur First, and they're giving, every company is giving to that accelerator like 7% of the company or something, but they say that they understand what they're paying for. They're paying not for the lectures they were listening to, but for this ability to meet each other. In terms of local co-founder, there is a legal requirement that every company registered in Singapore should have at least one local director. But again, it doesn't mean you need a local co-founder, because you can get a nominee.
We've got a question from Simeon here.
Wait, let's allow Ivan to ask a question verbally, because he raised the hand, and those who would like to ask questions verbally, just raise your hand. Ivan, can you please turn on your camera and microphone and ask your question briefly? Just a second, system will allow to add Ivan. Ivan, can you hear us? Okay, turn on your camera.
Yeah, I can hear all right. Yep.
All right, what is your question?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving me this chance. My question is, would you consider Singapore to be an efficient launchpad for working, let's say, with the Middle East? Or it's versus maybe registering a company there, or taking on board a representative in the Middle East from the business point of view and from the convenience point of view and so forth? So I can elaborate a bit. We are a technical company, and we're looking at opening an office in Singapore right now. But we are also looking at doing business in the Middle East. So we are thinking that either we should focus on the Singapore company and then go from there to the Middle East, to Indonesia and so forth, or we should separate the processes and use the Singapore for Asia, and the Middle East is something different.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question and very spot on. It is definitely possible to use Singapore to go to Middle East. I have experience myself in developing the market in the UAE and Bahrain and Oman. From Singapore is definitely possible. As usual, you will not be able to do everything from here, but it's never possible. So you will need to have some partners, but the HQ can be here. And if you are trying to optimize the structure, provided you want to go not only to the Middle East, but say also to Indonesia, then yes, of course, Singapore is probably the optimal base for that.
I believe Singapore is.
Now, I wanted to say, although I hear that, say, Dubai as a base is becoming better and better too. So I don't know how big you bet on the Middle East. If it's your core business, you might consider, say, Dubai. But if it's just one of the businesses, then Singapore will work.
many companies and even working professionals indeed moving there and here between Dubai and Singapore is because even climate-wise. But I do believe that Singapore is also the heart of Asia in a sense. So if you do consider expanding into Asia and also in Middle East, this probably would be the best compromise. Probably also it would be including some far countries like Australia and even farther, because it's just really in the middle of that. Thanks for answering that. I think it's a great question. Simon is waiting for his response on a question. So Simon is asking, you've said that in Singapore, business communication relies more on building relationship. How does that influence B2C market?
Doesn't
Maybe
influence much.
perspective.
No, it doesn't influence much the B2C market. It influences any one-on-one deals, partnerships, B2B deals for sure. Even if you're building a B2C business, while building the business, you will need to work with the businesses a lot. And then this is how it will influence you.
And maybe I add a little bit on that in terms of marketing communication. Countries that have this relationship type of community building and brand building, they do require very different communication. So you cannot come into Singapore and Asia with a communication, with a message, with a branding, with whatever creatives that you have outside Singapore, in Russia, or in the US. And therefore, this not direct, but relationship building is way too important. The sales cycle will be different, right? Everything will be different. So that you need to consider the way Asians make decisions as psychographics. We get another question from the user account name is MCSIM, and they're asking, could you tell us more about the important things in regional B2B sales? Or particularly, could you make sales to other country in Asian region? What other insights besides we couldn't push clients? I think Mark was touched a little bit on that, but could you probably a little bit expand on how would you be working in Asian countries in Singapore and how you you couldn't push the clients? Yeah.
If I were to shortlist one thing for the answer, it would be partners, alliances, and nothing will replace it. Fortunately, in Asia and Southeastern Asia, there are a lot of great partners that work across various countries. So it's not a big deal to find a partner who already knows several of the countries you need, like, I don't know, Vietnam, Thailand, and Indonesia. And then invest your energy into building the relationship with that partner from Singapore. And this is the easiest way to do it from here.
And maybe I would also add that such international companies like Enterprise Singapore, they do actually have offices in Moscow and in Europe and in South America and in the USA and pretty much all around the world. And their main KPI is actually to help Singaporean companies go global, and also companies from all around the world to collaborate with the Singaporean companies. So actually you can touch a bit of Singapore all the way from, you say, your Moscow or from your UK office there where you can communicate with them. And that a little bit touched the next question by Alexei Polikov, where he's asking, what is the best way to get warm introduction to government authorities? EDB, SynPower, and with deep tech, virtually crucial for Singapore, air cooling and water. So yeah, one way I told you, you can just reach out to the offices. They do locate in different countries and they're very friendly, but maybe Mark can expand a little bit more on the rest.
I agree with you on the one way. They're very accessible here, and if you just email, it will likely be answered. But you asked for the warm introduction. I have seen multiple cases and did myself when people say reach out to me who already knows a lot of people and just explain what they need, and then I help with the introduction. There are many people. So the other good way is to find a node that can connect you to the person who you know. Singapore is quite small, so probably every person who has extensive business experience in Singapore and already worked with several government bodies has that network and will be able to help you.
Okay, actually, great insights, guys, especially about additional thing from Alex as well. I liked about the representation of Singaporean governments, or companies, organizations in local countries. I have another question before we let you go in a couple of minutes. So today in pandemic, it's really hard to do things as we did before pandemic, right? And especially every startups requires sales. What would be your advice on doing sales during pandemic for international founders in Singapore or outside Singapore, but for Asian market specifically? Because Singaporean market, this pretty small, and everybody's targeting Asia. So there are probably some tips and recommendations for you to, to make this first 3 to 10 sales.
You mean during the pandemic when you cannot do it face to face?
Taking into account pandemic, so maybe it's not like, pandemic will end, but it's just additional circumstance that challenges the entrepreneurs.
I think in this respect, Singapore is not that different from other countries. Depends on in which business you are. B2B sales, especially large enterprise sales, are traditionally very difficult without a real contact, wherever you are, in Singapore as well. So if you're in large enterprise sales, then probably the best way is to try to establish this contact, warm introductions, discussions. If you cannot do it in person, do it online. But as for SMB sales and B2C segment, then there is no difference. Invest in digital channels. Singapore is very advanced in terms of digitalization, and consumers just in B2C space for sure, but also quite a large part of small businesses are very developed digitally, and they are customized for purchasing products online. So it shouldn't be any issue. Just invest in good marketing and promotion and channel.
Alex, do you have any more questions? I think we do. I think we can take one final question before we wrap it up, and I'll let you ask, Alex.
So we have a couple more questions. Let me check. Let me pick one. Okay, so I think this is a good wrapping up question. So what is the best way to find a proper mentor or to receive funding, networking, and to establish a business growth in Singapore? But maybe just also to summarize, what would be your final note? What would be your advice? And also how you particular would recommend founders to come into Singapore, and how could you help them? Just to make this conversation not just informative but also very actionable.
Yeah, I actually hear two questions in what you spoke about. First, let me still respond to the initial question: how to find this proper mentor for everything in Singapore. You need such a person. One of the ways is to find a person. Usually it happens via connections. So either you know someone, many people come to me, but I'm definitely not the only one. But I can help with many things here. Some people come to other people, but almost always it happens in the way that they ask someone, do you know who can help in Singapore? And then people recommend someone. This is one of the ways. And then the other way is institutional. There are several places where you can call, email, and they will try to help you. For instance, one of these places is SG Innovate. Go there and most likely you will get help. Now, Alex, what you asked about my brief and honest summarizing feedback on Singapore for founders, right? Something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
I think you need to think first about yourself, because depending on where you're coming from, Singapore will look more or less familiar, but say if you're coming from Eastern Europe, you will find out that Singapore is dramatically different. There are some things that are very, very developed here. And if you believe that these things are important, then Singapore will be a good fit for you. For instance, infrastructure, efficiency in general. If you have some product idea, you want to complete it here and test bed it with 5 clients, you can do it very fast here, everything will work. On that, also, you will probably be able to get enough funding for the company in your early stages, get support, that all works. But on the other hand, you need to think about what you need apart from business efficiency. You will be quite far from the Western civilization. You will be in the time zone, which is, for instance, very inconvenient if you want to be constantly in touch with the US, right? Very inconvenient. There are just not so many people here. And unless you are ready to fly all the time, many people feel a bit isolated and limited here. So you need to think well and compare different things. And if you find out that the advantages of Singapore is something that you need at this period of time, then definitely come. Singapore is a great place.
Thank you so much. I'd like, I think we're ready to wrap it up, and I suggest to do this the following way. I will show a few slides about our upcoming events, and while I'm showing the slides, I would like you, Alex, and you, Mark, think of the final statement you would like to close this session. For example, Alex, you as an entrepreneur from Singapore, and you, Mark, as a VC and our main speaker of this session for our audience. Does it work?
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me start.
Right. No, I just show first the slides, and I'll let you start. So,
Okay.
Just a second. Just a second. Should work. Just a second. Sorry about it. Okay, here it is. All right. Can you see my slides? I think you do. So about our upcoming events, for those who speak Russian, we have another VC speaking from Silicon Valley, Viktor Orlovsky from Fort Ross Ventures, and they will speak about how to bring your company from Reno to unicorn. And they wrote a book about that. It will be in Russian. Usually we do sessions only in English, but this is an exception for Russian-speaking audience. As for building a global network, we do monthly global founders meetups every first Friday of the month. And this is where you guys can meet founders from around the world, ask some support or give some advice, and actually build your own international network on using our community. So this is where you can contribute and probably take your business to the next level as well. Our upcoming events you can find in here. This is the link to our calendar. Just you can use this QR code for that. And another QR code you can use for Eventbrite page called Global World. You can find it on Google as well. All our future events are posted in there. You can just follow the page, and it will be notifying you of any upcoming global webinars like today we have. On this note, I'd like to pass the word with the closing statement to Alex first, as our key moderator of the session and entrepreneur from Singapore, and then the final closing statement from the Mark.
I think Singapore and pretty much any country is not for everybody, right? There's no one country that fits anyone. There's always some pros and cons. And then since in this session, we were trying to elaborate on them to just shed a little bit more light for you to make a better decision and next move. But I think what is important is that there are great communities in the world like Go Global, which I'm honored to be part of. And if I was coming to Singapore 9 years ago with not much friends, not much connections I had to build, now you have a very good chance and some friendly people in France. We can actually help you with a mentorship, with advice, with some even simple questions that you can ask, like in today's session. And I think this is something that really great, and that's something that you must leverage today, you know, because you are not building slow businesses. You are building unicorn startups, and to do that, you really need to be in a community. You really need to talk to right people, learn from right people like Mark, and achieve success together. So that would be my final point.
That's excellent, excellent thing. Network, in my opinion, is the key thing that moves business forward. And you can't do business on your own. You have to build your network to do sales, to do business, and the communities are helping. And we are happy to help. Mark, what would be your final words of wisdom or your final statement?
It was very moving and touching what Alex said, so I fully agree with that, of course. My recommendation is probably a bit more analytical. Definitely you'll find a lot more support now in Singapore. We're happy to help. Please think first. Most likely Singapore is a great place for you, but just think. I think the ideal stage of your company to develop it in Singapore is not a very early one, when you still need a lot of experiments, a lot of creativity around, when you already understand what you're going to do, but you haven't done a big thing yet, and you are not targeting a huge market yet. Everything in the middle is what you can build in Singapore. And to me, Singapore is for sure one of the best launch pads for companies in this stage. No huge risks. Just think about that, and if you feel it's a fit, you will find great support here.
And that was Alex Farseev and Mark Shmulevich. We were talking about startup ecosystem in Singapore. Of course, there is a lot of things we could discuss about Singapore, and we think we can do more in future. But at the moment, please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, our social media, and share this content, because we truly want to help entrepreneurs build businesses. And this content was created with that purpose. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Alex. And have a great rest of the day. And good night.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.